Questions were raised about the St. Tammany Sheriff giving no-bid work release contracts to businessmen with close ties. Now more questions tonight about how a company tied to those contractors is using inmates.
Yeah, they're supposed to go to work and back to the facility with few exceptions in between. But as eyewitness investigator Katie Moore reports, that doesn't always appear to be the case in St. Tammany Parish.
James Woodside is a skilled construction worker, raising 3 kids after a messy divorce. In 2006, he wrote a bad check to his ex-wife's lawyer.
It made restitution, and I paid that check off by 2007. But in 2009, I needed a job and moved to Georgia, and Louisiana didn't like that, so they put me in prison.
The judge revoked his probation, and the Department of Corrections sent him to the St. Tammany Parish Jail.
As soon as I saw the gentleman that runs the work release program in the hallways, I said, hey, here's my paperwork, I'm ready to go.
He was moved to North Shore Workforce in March of 2010. Woodside worked 2 jobs those first few months, doing construction work for J-Star Enterprises and at this car wash. Oftentimes, he says he worked 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And like all inmates are supposed to, Woodside says he returned to the Covington Workforce Center every night. J-Star paid him $18 an hour, the car wash $7.50 plus tips.
Well, I was told if I got a second job, they wouldn't take any of the money from the second job.
Did they?
Of course they did.
North Shore Workforce took 62% of his gross pay from both jobs, even though state regulations say deductions are not authorized from the second job. But Woodside's story only begins there. In September, he got a new job with Baker Pile Driving.
Everybody knew that the guys that worked for Baker were pretty much free.
He traded a job making $18 an hour for the one at Baker, making $12 an hour.
The pay was less, but you got the benefits, the freedom. It didn't matter what we took home. We all knew that the facility was going to keep our money.
Baker Pile Driving regularly employs inmates from North Shore Workforce. The company is closely tied to the Work Release Center. In fact, North Shore Workforce operates its business operations out of the Baker Pile Driving office on Ronald Reagan Highway. Robert Baker owns Baker Pile Driving, and a company connected to him owns this gas station near Madisonville. Behind it sits a trailer where James Woodside says he spent his first week working for Baker. It's the same trailer where another inmate, Jonathan Doré, overdosed on heroin less than a year later. His mother, Jane LeBlanc, says Jonathan would regularly stay overnight there. Sheriff Jack Strain, Workforce Center co-owner Marlon Peachy, and Robert Baker all denied in our previous investigations that inmates ever stay there.
If you're not offshore, you're spending the night here. Okay, that's the bottom line.
I stayed in the trailer for about a week before I got the assignment to go to Shreveport.
Marlon Peachy wouldn't do an interview with us for this story, but said in a written statement, quote, "To our knowledge, when Woodside worked offshore, he was housed by his employer within the guidelines of the program." Woodside says he never worked offshore.
Marlon Peachy and one of his employees were the only 2 that knew. The lady that ran the office for him were the only 2 that knew.
Woodside says he and a couple of other inmates were living in an apartment here at the Canebrake Apartments for months. He went to the hospital for a staph infection in Shreveport, and his records show where he was living.
I had to give the hospital some information. I couldn't tell them that I was an inmate, so I just gave them my address there at the condo. That's where I lived at the time.
Baker also paid him per diems, totaling $175 a week while he was in Caddo Parish. That's where Shreveport's located. At the same time, North Shore Workforce and the St. Tammany Sheriff's Office were getting $15 a day from the state to house Woodside, and taking 62% of his paychecks for room and board.
Oh yes, I could go pick up the keys from my foreman and go visit friends, family, go shopping, do whatever I wanted to do. Absolutely. I had to go buy my groceries. I went to the Walmart and the grocery store a couple times a week, but that was my personal limit. I knew that what we were doing was a major violation.
He admits he had beers now and again, but says others did much more, going to bars, not coming back to the apartment until the next day. Woodside says he also worked jobs for Baker in Baton Rouge and in Venice. Plus, he says he spent Thanksgiving at Robert Baker's St. Tammany Ranch, riding four-wheelers and having a good time. It's the same ranch where neighbors complained about the treatment of these horses last fall. When asked about it, Baker said, quote, "Inmates often work on my farm. Four-wheelers are often used in hauling fence material, herding cattle, and pulling small trailers while picking watermelon."
I know I wasn't in that facility at one point for 5 months straight. Literally, I did not set foot there for 5 months.
Woodside and Doré aren't the only two examples of Baker inmates getting free rein. Ronald Manuel is a Department of Corrections inmate serving a 10-year sentence for his 4th DWI. He's been working for Baker since July of 2010. James Woodside says Manuel was with him in Venice when he was on the job there, and this traffic ticket proves it. Manuel got it for driving a truck with an unlit plate and an obviously suspended license. Remember, he's serving time for his 4th DWI. The address he listed on the ticket is the address of North Shore Workforce in Covington. Manuel is still working for Baker in the work release program. This picture was taken at the Baker-linked trailer last November. And in another example of him getting free rein, marriage records show Manuel got married in April of last year in Slidell. They posted pictures of it on Facebook.
A Pearl River notary tells us she married Manuel at this Slidell restaurant last April. It happened during a motorcycle rally, a clear violation of DOC and North Shore Workforce policy.
Inmates are only allowed escorted absences from the facility, typically to attend funerals. Workforce officials say Manuel was removed from work release after an unspecified disciplinary action shortly after his wedding. And after 3 months in jail, he was back at North Shore Workforce as a trustee, and then back in the full work release program by October of last year. As for James Woodside,
how many hours a week do you think you were working at your max?
Probably around 110, 120.
Woodside says he estimates he made close to $40,000 at North Shore Workforce. After room and board, commissary payments, and child support sent to his now ex-wife, what did Woodside walk away with?
And you took away $2,000.
Yes, ma'am. Close to 3.
It's a defeating thought for any inmate trying to make something of himself so he has a foundation when he gets out of jail. Woodside has been raising his family, working in construction since his release. Katie Moore, Eyewitness News.
Both Robert Baker and St. Tammany Sheriff Jack Strain wouldn't do interviews with us about this story. In a statement, Sheriff Strain admits that a few years ago they, quote, noticed some deficiencies in the management and operations. He goes on to say that those deficiencies are, quote, practically non-existent after a management change at the facility. You can